Everything Saxophone Podcast, and we're at the Key Eves Everything Saxophone Podcast NAMM Show 2019. So proud and honored to have Miles Osland here. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good to be here, Donna. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we had Miles as a guest on our podcast already, but we're here at NAMM, and I just want to know about your experience so far. This is your first time being here.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a little bit overwhelming, but I've been to the Midwest Clinic, which this year was over 18,000. So this one I think is 80 or 90. So it's pretty big. So what's nice is kind of focusing on the wind area. You know, I don't really need to get into all the other audio and that kind of stuff. I just want to stay in this area where I belong.
I don't blame you. You know, if you meander into the drum section, it may be even more overwhelming and noisy.
Well, yes, yeah. I did bring my earplugs.
That was smart. Because it can get pretty loud. We are starting to hear some altissimo, I don't know what instrument going on there, but it is going to be a little noisy here at NAMM, but that's just the way it is. And it's a great thing. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Any booths that you saw in particular that you liked?
Yeah, what's nice about coming here is I get to see my friends and people that I deal with on the phone, like I've dealt with you on the phone, and this is the first time that I've actually gotten to meet you face to face. Get to see Rulon once or twice a year at the different conferences. Of course, Jody Jazz, Jody Espina, been by his booth. Con Summer actually was the one that got me the exhibitor badge to get me in here. I've been a summer artist for over 25 years. And my good friends at Diodario, I like to say that I have the trifecta of sponsorships. I'm with Summer, Jody Jazz, and Diodario. So I got my horn covered, my reeds covered, and my mouthpiece covered. So I'm pretty happy.
That's perfect. All great company.
Yes, yeah.
So let's talk more about you. And what I wanted to talk about to start with was your series of books called the Scale Anthology. I'm just going to pull this up right over here and show you Volume 1. And this is modal and pattern-oriented scales. It's linear and vertical exercises for the contemporary saxophonist. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about this book and how it can help students develop their sense of understanding scales, not just linearly, but also vertically.
Right. The Volume 1 deals with modal scales, 7-note scales, and pattern-oriented exercises like the diatonic seventh patterns. But the philosophy, the idea is what the subtitle of the book is: Linear and Vertical Exercises for the Contemporary Saxophonist. So you take the linear idea of a scale and make a vertical exercise or a vertical component out of it. So we all know, let's just take the C Lydian scale, okay? We know that as a 7-note scale, right? C Lydian. So it's those 7-note scales in a linear fashion that we usually practice when we learn our modes. But then what my concept and what my books do is it takes those 6 or 7 or 8-note scales, 6 notes if you're working on the whole tone, 7-note if you're working on all your modal scales, all your 7-note scales, and then your 8-note scales, like your octatonic scales, are in the symmetrical category, and those are all in Volume 2. Volume 1 is the modal and pattern-oriented scales. That's Volume 1. And Volume 2 is the synthetic and symmetrical scales. So you take that linear concept of a 7-note scale and make it a 7-note chord. So if you stack those 7 notes that you get from a C Lydian scale, you get a C major 13 sharp 11 chord, okay? So if you play them back to back, one linearly and the other one vertically, they have the same sound, but they have a whole different shape. One is linear, one is vertical. Here's the linear scale again. Then make that 7-note scale that I played 2 octaves. Make that 7-note scale a 7-note chord. So becomes. So when you play them back to back, they have the same sound, the same sonic quality of. It's a major scale with a sharp 4, the Lydian sound as we know it. But when you play it linearly, you have a linear shape. When you play it in arpeggio fashion, it has a more vertical concept. So you look at players through the years. Cannonball Adderley was known as a linear player. He played a lot of scales. Linearly, played them quite well. I've done years and years of trying to figure out what Cannonball played, many transcriptions. But then you compare that to the great solo by Coleman Hawkins on Body and Soul, which is a lot of arpeggiations. So Coleman Hawkins was more of a vertical player per se, and compared to Cannonball Adderley, who was more of a linear player. So what I try to do, and what I try to do with this book, and what I try to do with my students, and what I personally try to do as a player, is because I like to listen to players that have a good concept, a good handle on both linear and vertical performing while they're improvising.
Let me ask you something. If someone were to pick up this book, how would they approach working on it? Like, would they, just go from page 1 and go all the way through, or is there a system?
Right, there is a system. I created this specifically for my students at the University of Kentucky.
Which you've been there since 1989.
Right. Basically, this book came along because I got tired in lessons of having to write it out every time. So it's nice to have it in book fashion, so I could just say, just go buy the book. All right, and so in the book I have it laid out so that it's in progressive course of study. So the easier stuff you work through, the more difficult get into the more synthetic and symmetrical arpeggiations and concepts. But then also, if you're a student, I have it laid out in an 8-semester breakdown. So hopefully, if you stay on track with everything, you have fall semester freshman, spring semester freshman, and so on and so forth, all the way through your senior year. So if you stay on track, you get through all 2 volumes. But it's a lot of stuff. It's over 1,200 scales and arpeggios through the 2 different volumes, and they work it through all 12 keys. And of course, the students have to have all these things memorized. I say these books are just, they're written out in all 12 keys. All the scales and the arpeggios are written out. But, it's just a guide. You shouldn't be looking at the book when you're practicing your scales. You should be having everything memorized and listening for it for your ear training and your theory. Lots of good theory training too when you go through these exercises. But in 30 years at UK, maybe just a handful, maybe a half dozen to a dozen students have actually made it through the complete sequence of the 2-volume scale anthology.
Do you find that a lot of students that come to you as freshmen are more linear players, or am I wrong about that?
No. Yeah, because basically a lot of them all they've known are learning their scales. And luckily, if they've had a hip teacher, they've learned the modes, but that's all based off of the major scale anyway, so they're still just playing major scales in a linear fashion. If they're lucky, maybe they've practiced their major triad arpeggios, so it gets a little bit of a vertical concept, but this breaks it down to a 7-note arpeggio versus a 3-note arpeggio that you get when you're just working with your triads.
Do you find that, gosh, that may be a challenge for somebody, who's only played scales linearly, to have to skip notes and play not only triads, but 6, 7 note types of chords?
Right. It is, but it's a process of getting out of that comfort zone of playing linearly and forcing oneself to have a different concept or approach, different sound quality to your improvising.
In fact, when we were talking before, you did such great performances of Bob Mintzer's pieces, and one of the pieces, I think it was actually called 3 Pieces, and it was you with drums, and it was so good, and I felt it was very angular playing, vertical playing, as you would call it.
Right, and just these exercises in these books help me have the technique to be able to do that. Yeah, it's just the building on my artillery of technique is what I like to call these books, and because hopefully, and I'm share a story about with Bob Mintzer. I did a whole book of Bob Mintzer transcriptions, and along with that book I got to interview him, and a CD of that interview came with the book. One thing, there was one piece that had a lot of half diminished sounds or chords going through it, which is kind of an odd time. Your half diminished chord is usually just a passing chord, but Bob had it where it stayed on that chord and that sound for a certain period of time and went through many different keys. And so in his improvising, what he was doing is he was arpeggiating a perfect minor 13 flat 5 with perfect extensions. And so when I talked to Bob, I brought that up. I said, were you thinking about doing those arpeggios specifically when those chords came up and you were improvising? Was it a conscious effort? And he said, no, it's obviously something that I was practicing, and it just crept into my improvising. So that's what these exercises are supposed to do. They're not supposed to be the perfect sounding solo. You don't want to listen to somebody just playing scales or just somebody playing arpeggios. It's what you do with those that makes your improvising interesting and exciting.
Like you said before, it's combining the linear and the vertical.
Yeah, exactly.
So in a sense, like that piece, I remember just being very vertical, but there's also linear aspects of it as well.
Right.
I like to call it tools in the tool shed.
Yeah.
I'm also wondering too, like when you have your freshman students starting to study out this book, I wonder how much it improves their ear training.
Yeah, that's another great thing about these books is that, most of the students know a major scale, and as I said, if they're hip, maybe they know some of their modes, but still that's just based on the major scale. But you look at that 7-note scale, and then it becomes a 7-note chord, and that chord is a C major 13 sharp 11. Wow. I mean, that's a lot of chord. That's a lot of notes. Probably 3 or 4 notes more than a student had ever arpeggiated. If they're lucky, maybe they'd arpeggiated up to the 7 or the 9, where all of these go up to the fully extended 13 chords.
Yeah, so it would definitely open up their ears and open up possibilities.
Yeah, and on the extensions and the alterations on the extensions. So you're not just always playing 1, 3, 5, 7. You're up like the great Charlie Parker was. He was always playing on the 9s and the 11s and the 6s, the 13s. That's what made bebop sound like bebop. He wasn't just playing on the 3s and the 7s all the time.
This is awesome. So this was just one aspect. What I also wanted to ask you about. First of all, you're here at NAMM. Are you performing anywhere?
Yeah, I'll be playing with the Jody Jazz Jam tomorrow night, Friday night. Yep, you'll be there too. So looking forward to that. Yeah.
I'll get a chance to hear both linear and vertical.
Yeah, hopefully.
No,
Hopefully.
no, it's going to be a lot of fun. But the other thing I wanted to get into was more like the performance stuff that you're doing. You got some exciting stuff coming up.
Right. Let me get that. Where is that CD? Oh, there it is. This is my student ensemble known as Mega Sax, and this is a recording that we did just recently with Jeff Coffin and the great Jeff Driscoll, and also Tony DeGrati. It's a student group and student arrangements of Jeff Coffin tunes, and some with rhythm sections, some without, some with just drums, some just with saxophone. It's called Stinkin' 3.0, and the reason why is because the first Mega Sax CD was called We Don't Need No Stinkin' Rhythm Section, and that came actually from when I took the Mega Sax to a jazz competition. They played their thing, and it was without a rhythm section. It was just a quartet, and the judge gave us the highest score possible, and then all he said on the judge sheet is that you guys don't need no stinking rhythm section.
That's awesome.
So that's where we kind of took off with our first recording being we don't need no stinking rhythm section. Then the second CD was titled Stinking Up the Place, because some of it had some rhythm section on it, but still a lot of just a cappella, where this one is Stinkin' 3.0. It's the third version in the Stinkin' series, if you will.
That's awesome. That's great stuff. Any other performance projects coming up for you in the next month or so?
Yeah, I'm on sabbatical this semester, and one thing that is great about being on sabbatical is I get to work on projects, and the recording project specifically that I'm working on this sabbatical is I'm going to Sweden to work with a great jazz vibist. His name is Anders Strand. Been working with him for over 20 years. He's an incredible composer too. So he's writing a piece for me, a multi-movement piece, one movement for flute, another movement for alto, and another movement for soprano. And then in duo, it's just him and me playing. And so he'll come over here for a few weeks. I get to go over to Stockholm for a few weeks, and at both places we'll record and do recitals and get a real nice recording out of it.
I'll see you tomorrow.
That's awesome. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this one final question.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the most embarrassing sticky G-sharp key incident you ever had during
Right.
performance?
Before I had these suckers, I'll tell you this because it wasn't me, but it was my wife, because it's such a great story. She was playing the Premier Rhapsody by Debussy with the Lexington Philharmonic Orchestra. And, of course, she didn't check her G-sharp key before she started. And there's right in a slow open section, exposed section. It's a G-sharp, and luckily it didn't stay stuck. It just kind of sounded like a grace note. So maybe Debussy would be rolling over in his grave because it sounded like a G natural to a G-sharp grace note, but but nobody in the audience knew. But it was because of situations like that we use these things, so that, boy, things like that won't happen.
Yeah, and I understand you use key leaves, you use
Yep.
the bent vine, and your students also?
Yeah, when these things first came out, I talked to Rulon, and at the University of Kentucky, we have 5 baritone saxes. We have a real nice Summer Series 2 bass sax, 4 tenor saxophones, 5 soprano saxophones, and we just have one alto because everybody else has their own alto, obviously. But so we have all the other sopranos, tenors, and baries well outfitted. So for all those instruments, they all have the key leaves on them, and the students know how to use them, and most of the students have bought them and using them on their own horns too.
And I bet you're finding that a lot of less sticky G-sharp keys.
Yeah, Exactly.
I know for me, with the Vent Vine, this has certainly preserved my palm keypads.
Yes. Right.
Some great stuff.
And what's nice is for the younger horns with, or the newer horns with the F sharp key, the Vent Vine also has one for the F sharp key, because that one, being way up top on the tenon, it really gets stuck very easily along with all those other palm keys. So it's great to have it.
Definitely. Well, listen, Miles, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. I know you're really busy, but taking the time with us to join us at the podcast.
Oh, it's been great. Yeah, I look forward to playing with you tomorrow night.
Yeah, same here. It's nice meeting you in person.
Yeah, good.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.